So this last lecture on the immune system is going to deal with how plants respond to pathogens. So plants have pathogens just like we do. They deal with the same types of pathogens. They deal with bacterial infections, fungi, protists, viruses, just like us. And we can see how plants and pathogens have kind of evolved together. So as a plant adapts to a certain defense against the pathogens are then adapting to overcoming those defenses. And so the evolution is sort of driving each other. And we call this the evolutionary arms race. And we see this in us as well. Plants they have both chemical and mechanical defenses, and very similar to us. Some of their defenses can be considered constitutive, which means that they're always present in the plant, and others are induced, meaning that they are only produced when the plant has been attacked or some kind of damage or stress to the plant. Plants have physical barriers, just like we do. So like our first line of defense is a physical barrier keeping the organism out of our bodies. Well, plants have the same thing. So the outer surfaces of the plants can prevent bacterial fungal spores from entering. Some fungi have evolved to have adapted to secrete particular chemicals that can actually break down these barriers. One thing that's very different about plants than animals is that plants don't generally repair tissue that's damaged by pathogens. Instead, they seal it off so that the pathogen can't travel and infect other cells. So plants can do this because they can replace damaged parts with new ones. We can't do that. So we tend to have to repair tissues where plants don't have to worry about that. Okay, so here is a signal transduction pathway showing us how a plant might deal with a pathogen. So here is our pathogen, and so the pathogen might produce some kind of an elicitor. It's going to elicit a immune response from the plant. Here might be an enzyme that maybe a fungus has produced that's going to break down the cell wall or something, and then that might be recognized by an elicitor. It's going to elicit an immune response. And so that's going to bind to a cell membrane receptor. So again, signal molecule binding to a receptor, and that's going to cause a signal transduction pathway and some kind of cellular response. And in this case, it's going to cause the transcription of certain genes within the nucleus. And so certain genes might code ultimately to make some polysaccharides, and the polysaccharides will then be embedded in the cell membrane along with some extensin, and that's going to help strengthen the cell wall to prevent further damage or further infection or invasion. The other genes could code for these pathogenesis-related proteins. Pathogenesis is disease, the beginning of a disease. And so these proteins have a couple of functions. One is that they can travel through the plasmodesmata and invade another cell. Go to another cell and then signal that cell that it's under attack and to kind of warn it. The other thing I forgot to mention about the polysaccharides is they can block that plasmodesmata, so pathogens can't travel from cell to cell. These PR proteins also can attack the pathogen. They will cause damage to the cell wall. So remember that fungi and bacteria have cell walls that are structurally different than the cell walls of plants, and so these proteins can cause damage to that. And then the last are the phytoalexins, and these are like antibiotics, which means antibody. They go after living things, and so they're going to attack the pathogen, whether it's a bacteria or a fungus. They can also kill the cell itself, which again the plant wants to do to kind of seal off damage. So that's sort of the signal transduction pathways. And then another kind of analogy with us is they don't have antibodies, but they do code for genes that produce these membrane proteins, and they call these R genes or resistant genes. And the pathogens are producing these avirulence genes or AVR genes. Now, if the pathogen's AVR gene matches the R gene of the plant will be immune to the particular pathogen. They won't be resistant to it. If, however, the plant doesn't make a cell membrane receptor resistant gene that's going to match the AVR gene, then it's susceptible to infection. So here we have the same AVR molecule, but it a different receptor. So this one would be susceptible to that. So in a way, it's kind of like the same as us as far as the genes and the producing proteins, and the proteins have to match up and whatnot, and you have to match the pathogen, and so it's kind of an analogy there. So that's plant defenses. I hope it helped.